words, they're not interested in being with someone who's really wealthy who treats them like garbage. If you look at sort of who people select to have sex with versus who people select to try and form long-term relationships with them, I mean, there are many men who would not choose to be with the woman that is most attractive to everybody because they don't have the confidence they could keep her.
That's
right?
a good point.
Even if she's not a flirt and wouldn't be looking, right? Even if she didn't have a wandering eye. Some men deliberately wouldn't want to be with the most beautiful. People tend to match up pretty closely in terms of attractiveness. Yes, it's true that resource potential is an important variable because people have to think about safety and childcare and a number of things.
It's the only way I have
but women
a free
work
life.
too, right? Women can work too, right? They can opt to work and make money. But more often than, more important than any other feature across all cultures is that the woman reports that she sought someone who is kind to them. Not necessarily kind to everybody, but kind to them, right? Kind to them. Okay, so even if you think of like extreme money, right? Extreme money, or you think of extreme bodies or extreme resources, right? That somebody has. Women, in terms of who they tend to pair up with long-term, assuming heterosexual, right? They're heterosexual, because here we're making a bunch of assumptions. But in that mold, what is shown up over and over again in the data is that their top priority is that someone be kind to them. In other words, they're not interested in being with someone who's really wealthy who treats them like garbage.
Is that
and
also...
I think this gets lost because people think, oh, it's all about money. It's not all about money. It's about safety and kindness, because you're talking about a long-term bond.
Right. Yeah.
Now, then people say, well, what about this notion of gold diggers? And by the way, there are male and female gold diggers, because the last thing you want is someone with a ton of reproductive potential, resource potential, who's going to treat you like garbage. Chances are they're not going to stay with you. Or you're going to be there, but then they're going to bring in other mates. You know, and so when you look at the roots of jealousy and concerns about infidelity, or you look at the roots of sort of like concerns about resource potential and all that, it all kind of makes sense in this very old-fashioned model. It also makes sense in the model that we live in now. Kindness toward each other is fundamentally the most important variable, which is kind of reassuring. I don't say that to be politically correct. That's how the data fall out. And that never gets discussed because it's not as edgy as thinking like, oh yeah, it's all about money, it's all about beauty, it's all about this, it's about the Lamborghini. It's like, no, like how is he gonna treat you? And so there's also something very special to people about the other person who is very desired by a lot of people, treating them particularly nicely. Right? Like, I mean, you hear this notion of being picked, right? And there's mutual picking, and everything is changing now too, right? I mean, the way that you know, there are apps like Bumble where women actually have to say that it's, yes, I will talk to you, right? It's not a bidirectional there's an asymmetric conversation. So again, not on the apps, but I'm fascinated by this because it's human dating behavior, but it's always going to be through the filter of biology.
Well, maybe you can answer this because you're a neuroscientist. So can the brain outpace evolution, where we have millions of years of evolution that men say, I'm attracted to these proportions that will nourish my kids the best, and women say, I'm attracted to these features that say he'll take care of my kids. Now society's changing in the last 70 years. Crazy rate of change. All this is like getting changed up. Can your brain outpace your evolution, which has been hardwired for millions of years, and say, you know what, I don't care about all these things?
So we have this real estate in our brain right behind our forehead called the prefrontal cortex, and it's your rule setting machine. Okay, so you can create new rules for what's going to drive your behavior. Like, we can decide that what's important in a given set of situations is blank. You actually see this, right? If people go away on retreats or they go to some event and there's only, you know, let's say, again, we're assuming heterosexual relationships here, 10 men and 10 women, they're all heterosexual. You know, who you find most attractive will be gauged against the other 9, right? Right. And so, but in a world in New York City, right, then the mean is that the distribution is much broader and the mean is shifted perhaps, right? And so you can't beat evolution. You're always going to be constrained by brain wiring, but you can condition certain things. And also sometimes people are selecting for somebody who's really nice, really funny, we get along so well. I mean, there are other criteria, right?
I'm just trying to get you to say it's okay for us to be shallow, really, at the end of the day.
I mean, it's as okay to be shallow as being shallow is important to you. Right? There are people who are like, they have their list, right? They're like, I want to be with someone who graduated college, or I don't care, or I want to be with somebody who, you know, is physically attracted to, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the reality is that no matter how two people are to one another, like at some point it becomes familiar. But there are certain people, like I'll just disclosure, I'm actually become in a relationship, monogamous relationship, actually become more attracted to the person I'm with. And I think it's something through the nose. It's like a pheromone thing.
Yeah.
I become very conditioned to them, right? It's not that no one else becomes attracted to me, but I become very conditioned to them. And so I don't know that everyone's like that. I've only been me, but I know that there are some people that get really restless after they've been with the same person for a little while. And sometimes that's psychological, like they never got it out of their system. They married the first person they were with. And other times it could be physiological, you know?
Both of them.
So there's a lot of range on these. I mean, the biology constrains it. To answer your question, it constrains it, sets some outer bounds on this. Like, I don't think, for instance, that we can become attracted to like tree frogs, for instance.